Welcome to our class where we're going to look at corporate finance. Corporate finance, you need to know the principles of corporate financial management. So we have a question here. Wangi and Company, a construction and real estate company incorporated in Zambia, and they have been in business for 15 years and are considering venturing into a Mauritian market. They have approached you for advice. Advise Wangi and Company on particular risks that they may be faced with if they decided to start doing business overseas. Part B, why should a private company go public? Okay, Chiloba, you can take up that. What are the risks associated with dealing? This is 15 marks. Risks of overseas trade or business. What are some of the risks that we expect? Anyone? We discuss this question.
Okay, I think I have an idea, although they kind of confuse me because there's one that's divided into three, which is the transaction, economic, and is it foreign, something like that. So now I don't know how to really put and divide them. So I think that's where I would like to get clarity.
I think your volume is very low. So
okay, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, much better.
Okay, I was saying for the risks, I'm yet to really get to what exactly the risks are because they're divided. There's the economic risk, the foreign exchange, the currency, the transaction. So I don't know if you're supposed to mention them like that or mention one and then subdivide them into also other components. I'm not really sure on that one.
Okay, they're combination. They're combination, so you could mix them.
Give it a try. Okay, so for me, some of the trade risk of dealing international could be issues to do with maybe the exchange rate risks, because now you're running a company in a foreign country, so you expect to have the risk on the exchange rates. Other risks that they may be faced has to do with political instability, issues to do with change of government in that country where you are doing your business with can also affect the business. So those are some of the risks. And also the risk of natural disasters. Assuming maybe you are doing business in a country where it's infested with a lot of natural disasters. So those are some of the things that you can face. So the political instability, the exchange rate risk, those are some of the things that I would come up with. Thank you.
That's good. That is for 15 marks. Let me expand on just what he has said. It's important that you give it your best shot, because this is a better, for some of you who are good with theoretical, better shot of getting. So when venturing into a new market, especially a different country from Zambia, one should be open to a number of challenges or risks that are obvious. So some of the risks that Wangi and Company may face could be as follows. So we could have a risk of what we inevitably should know. This is the foreign exchange risk from our Zambian kwacha. They will need to be exposed to the risk of fluctuations between the Zambian kwacha and the Mauritian rupee. So this would impact their revenues tremendously. Secondly, is a market competition risk. You know, in a foreign land, a number of dynamics that are there, especially that favor local industries. So there must be a well-established local real estate construction company in Mauritius making it's challenging for Wangi and company to compete and establish significant market share. So understanding the local market dynamics and building competitive advantage would be very important. The other one is on the technology gap risk. So Mauritius is a more developed country than Zambia, obviously. And therefore, there might be some glitches in technological standards with in comparison with Zambia. So Wangi and company now will need to invest in the latest technologies to meet the local standards. Also, we have the cash flow risk, which entails Wangi and company should allocate substantial budget for marketing, promotional activities, because Mauritius is initially a new company where they will need to create brand awareness. And so they'll need to build a customer base. So managing their cash flows effectively in the initial stages is going to be cardinal. So they're going to have what we call a cash flow risk. You mentioned something to do with culture. Differences in culture, business practices between the two countries, Zambia and Mauritius, will pose significant challenges in the workplace operations. So one company will need to do what? They will need to adapt to the approach that will align with the local culture, marrying it with ours briefly, but maintaining the organizational values. Is that clear enough? 15 marks. Number part B.
Yes.
Why would the company venture to go public? 10 marks. Who would want to try on that one? Or the company want to go public? Well, there are several reasons why a company should go public. So some of the reasons that a company should have, number one is capital infusion. Going public allows a company to raise significant amounts of funds from would-be investors through the sale of shares. So this is one of the major reasons. Second one is diversification and strategy. So existing shareholders in the private company may seek to diversify their investment by adding value. So they'll sell their shares to the public so that they could diversify with views as well. Enhanced evaluation. Public listing will increase perceived value of the company. So for companies that have value on the stock exchange, potential investors would want to see the ratings on the stock exchange because the performance is in public domain. One would want to go public because of brand visibility and credibility. So public listing can enhance a company's visibility quite right and quite credibility, but it also enhance the brand recognition, which would be beneficial to attracting new customers. So going public also would mean liquidity for employees. They will benefit from the liquidity that comes with the public listings as they can potentially sell their shares to the open market, hence thereby providing an additional incentive for recruitment and retention. So this is how question 1 could be answered. Are we together? All right, we can proceed. Distinguish. I'm just doing the theoretical ones for now so that we could distinguish systematic and unsystematic risk. Distinguish systematic and unsystematic risk. Anyone?
So systematic risk, this is just the variability in returns that is caused due to the change in the market movements. So such as like changes in interest rates and things like that can affect actually the return on investment. So that is what we call systematic risk. Then unsystematic risk. So this is the variability in returns that is not explained by the changes in the market movements. So an example that I can give could be a civil unrest, demonstration that can affect your business. So those are some of the unsystematic risks that one can give in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm glad somebody has been reading. So for how many marks is that? For 10 marks, you will need to be well informed. Okay, so maybe just to add on what he has said, to give a brief definition of each of these risks, which we call systematic and systematic risk. So we can say systematic risk is also known as market risk, which is not diversifiable. It is a risk that is inherent to the entire market. So this kind of risk is associated with factors that you may not really have control over, such as interest rates, economic recessions, geopolitical events, natural disasters like earthquakes. Systematic risk cannot be diversified. However, it can only, it cannot be eliminated, it can only be reduced to some extent. So investors are generally exposed to systematic risk and cannot eliminate it through diversification, no. So you need to make fundamental considerations when making a financial decision. And systematic risk, on the other hand, affects a specific industry. It's a specific risk that is diversifiable and is associated with individual stocks or a specific industry. This one rises from specific factors such as management issues, labor strikes, regulatory issues, even a product recall. Unlike a systematic risk, which can be reduced, this one is one which can be eliminated completely using diversification by holding a diversified mix of assets or portfolio. Now, let's make a distinction between these two in point form, just to add on for the 15 marks that or the 10 marks that I'm looking for. So let me talk about systematic risk. So this one is market oriented, is associated with the overall market movement. It's non-diversifiable, meaning it cannot be reduced through diversification and it affects the entire market, no matter how you diversify the portfolio. External factors, it is caused by external factors to the specific industry that this industry cannot control. They're beyond the companies. It affects all securities. Systematic risk affects all securities in the market, so it cannot be eliminated by holding the diversified portfolio. So it cannot be predicted. It also is not possible to predict. All right. Then we go to unsystematic risk. What did I say about unsystematic risk? Unsystematic risk is also known as specific risk. Unsystematic risk is also known as specific risk. This is a type of risk that is associated with a particular industry. It arises from specific factors such as management issues, labor strikes. It is diversifiable through creating a well-diversified portfolio, which includes investment across industries. Internal factors, it is caused by internal factors within an industry and can be controlled by managing companies' management system. It affects individual securities. So unsystematic risk affects individual securities or a specific sector. So it cannot influence the entire market. It can be reduced or eliminated through diversification. So that is about these kind of risks. Are we together? All right. So combining two or more assets would typically lead to diversification benefits. What are the benefits of diversification? What is a general condition under which you will have benefits? Briefly explain. So 5 marks, 5 marks. Anyone? I think I mentioned them briefly in my elucidation. What are the benefits of diversification? And what is a general condition under which diversification may have benefits? Anyone? Anyone? Not the same person? Okay, since there's only one person who has been reading, you can continue. Uh-huh. All right, so diversification is a strategy of doing what? Of spreading risk through investments, spreading the investments in our wider basket. So diversification refers to a strategy of spreading investments across different financial instruments, industries, sectors, or a class of assets. The aim is to mitigate the impact of volatility in a particular asset or group of assets. So by diversifying, investors want to minimize what? The impact of risk in a particular class, individual investments, or a group of investments. So the goal of diversification basically is to balance between the risk and the return by spreading investments across various categories and potentially leading to a more stable long-term return. Now, what are the conditions under which we can usurp benefits or we can extract benefits in diversification? There are several conditions that would entail benefiting from these. So, number one, benefits can be usurped under certain conditions when there's a high degree of correlation between the assets. When the portfolio is highly correlated, they tend to move in the same direction, resulting in an ability for one asset to offset the losses. This situation will diminish the effectiveness of diversification. So you've seen some assets go this side. So if you want to diversify, you get assets that have this movement. So collectively, you're going to have something that is well balanced, stable. So diversification becomes more effective to vulnerable portfolios that are prone to systematic risk factors and have potential to declining your returns. Now, under what conditions would we look at diversifying? So when we have economic downturn, especially in severe cycles where we are at the peak here, where unemployment is high, inflation is high, so various classes would experience significant losses simultaneously due to the broad. So you would want to look at, for instance, if the markets are down, you know that the pharmaceutical industry, no matter how the economy is doing, but people get sick, but they need medication. So you need to look at what? Economic downturn. Also the global crisis. During these periods, it is very important that correlations amongst various markets, asset classes, will analyze. This will lead to investment eroding benefits from the other. So you need to look at the broader perspective using a global analysis. Okay, so also industry-specific events, the impact that it may have on the entire industry, such as regulatory changes, technological changes. This can lead to correlated movements. So you would consider diversifying in another sector that may not be affected within the same industry. So in most cases, here investors are urged to reassess their diversification strategy. They need to consider alternative assets or geographical regions that are less correlated and also that may achieve a higher risk management approach. So that is about diversification and the benefits therein. Okay. Are we moving? Are we learning something? Okay, an investor has approached you for advice. Explain any 3 forms of businesses you can set up, the benefits and drawbacks of each of them. I think here, this is, if you haven't spoken, it's high time you spoke. You've been approached. Explain any 3 forms of businesses you can set up, the advantages and disadvantages.
Okay, so the three types of businesses one can set up is you can either set up a sole proprietorship
Mm-hmm.
or a partnership or a limited company.
Mm.
Is it?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Mm. So there are several business setups that one can consider. So we have sole proprietorship. This is the smallest type of business that one can decide to venture in. So what are the characteristics of sole trader? So number one, sole trader is a one-man business owned by a single individual. It is not treated separately. It's one with the owner. So the advantage is that to set it up requires minimal legal requirements. There's direct control and decision making. The owner enjoys all the profits, well, even all the problems. But we're looking at advantages. The flexibility in operations and making quick decisions, and there are fewer regulatory requirements compared to other business structures. The demerits. They have unlimited liability, meaning the owner is personally liable for all the debts. The limited liability, it has limited ability to raise capital because it's limited to the owner and a few friends. There's limited managerial expertise because you're alone. There's lack of continuity because the business dies with the owner. And it's also difficult to attract high caliber employees because you have limited growth. So you can employ one or two, but not high caliber staff because of the size. All right. Another kind of uh, organization is what? A partnership. So a partnership is a structure of two or more persons who share ownership and management responsibilities. Of course, there are different types of partnership. There are general partners and limited partners, but generally, this is a partnership with the following advantages. Number one, the shared decision making, which is complementary with the skills. Number two, shared financial resources, meaning potentially for higher capital contribution. So you share resources, you share skills, you share the profits, and also easy to access other talent and expertise. The disadvantages are that there's unlimited liability, exposing personal assets to debt obligations for individual partners. Any potential disagreement will affect the partnership. You share the profits. It's like a problem. It's better off human beings generally selfish, wanting more for less. So you share the profits, not a good thing. And it's difficult to raise substantial capital compared to a corporation. So a corporation is another entity that we can explain as follows. Number one, we have the following characteristics. Okay. Following characteristics. Okay, so for a corporation, it's a legal entity separate from its owners, providing limited liability and protection to the owners. It can raise funds through shares and also is managed by a board of directors. Advantages that has limited liability for the shares, thereby protecting personal assets which the other companies or corporation entities do not have. Access to broader pool of capital through issuance of stock and bonds. It has perpetual existence because the people can die, but it has assured continuity. It has ability to attract high caliber employees through stock options and other incentives. It is complex in its advantage to establish the double taxation, individual tax, corporate tax. It's expensive to manage. Potential conflicts between shareholders may lead to urgency problems. It is subject to stringent government regulations and oversight compared to other business structures. So this is about these three forms of businesses. So this is a 9-mark question that requires people to argue their facts very well. All right, debt finance is another source of long-term capital for companies. Discuss any 3 types of debt finance that are available to companies. Anyone? Can you answer that? This is unit 1. Discuss any 3 types of debt instruments available to companies. Discuss any 3 types of debt instruments available to companies. People who have been preparing for writing exams next week.
The first one is bank loans.
Okay.
That's another, is a short-term instrument that they acquire. Then the other debt instrument that we can talk of, it could be in the form of securities, treasury bills and bonds, where a company corporation can issue stock on the capital markets in order to raise funds required for the business. I think those are the only 2 that I can recall.
Okay, the others.
I
Others.
don't know if equity was mentioned.
Doesn't know that equity was mentioned. Is it part of debt? Any others? What are the others saying? What are the others saying? We're looking at what? The available forms of debt instrument. I was expecting to hear debentures, those instruments that they are bonds. Okay. Bank loans, all these are debt instruments. Okay, so there are several debt instruments that one must be alive to. They are what we call bonds. What are bonds? The topic on its own. What are debentures? So this was carrying how many marks? 6 marks. So you can choose any 3 if you like. All right, so let me add any 3. There are more than 3 there, even 13. So let me talk about 3. I'll just describe them briefly. We have bonds. These are debt instruments issued by corporations or companies. They have fixed interest rates and maturity date. So the features as follows. So these stem from high grade to high grade and investment grade bonds, which typically are traded in public. These have an advantage because they are stable in the long term, deductible interest payments, and have considerations of interest rates influenced by a company's credit rating. So we also have other types of debt instruments like bank loans. These are funds borrowed from a financial institution with the specific repayment terms. They can be short-term or long-term, secured or unsecured, often with various covenants. The advantages are in their flexibility in repayment. Number two, they have interest rates, which helps you build a relationship with the lender. And considerations that they have is that you may require collateral to get these loans. There are strict criteria that are available to apply. Then potentially they may lead to challenges in financial hardships if not well managed. Then we also have convertible bonds. These are debt instruments that are covered into a company's shares during a specified period. So they provide an option to the bondholder to benefit from the stock appreciation. So the advantages that they enable companies to raise funds at lower interest rates, appealing to investors to seek potential equity. So considerations is that you can convert them or dilute into existing shareholders, okay, to become part of the company. So we also have other types of debt, like debentures. They can be secured or unsecured with fixed or floating interest rates. They have specific maturity dates, and these ones typically are paid periodically or semi-annually. The debenture holders here have a claim on the company's assets when there's a default, but this claim, well, secondary to the secured debt holders. So this is basically how this question is supposed to be answered. So in relation to company sourcing capital, discuss 3 benefits of using equity. What are the benefits of using equity instead of what? Borrowing debt instruments. 6 marks. What are the benefits? Anyone? That's our last question. So there are several advantages of using equity than using debt for a number of reasons. Number one, there is no obligation to repay. Unlike debt, equity becomes what? Part of the company. It reduces the financial strain. The second one is that there's reduced financial risk. Equity does not need to be repaid, making the company to be less vulnerable to financial distress. Equity also flexibility in cash flow management. There are no fixed payments associated with equity. Companies may be flexible regarding management of dividends, so they may declare when there is an interest made. Long-term solutions, equity can provide stable and long-term source funding for a company. Sharing of risks and responsibilities, equity holders, who are the shareholders, sometimes can choose to sell these shares elsewhere if they so think the company is not doing fine. It enhances the borrowing capacity. So companies can use equity for other important and borrow elsewhere for other things. So it increases our borrowing capacity. So thank you so much for your time. I thought we would share on these underrated theoretical questions that are simplified in this manner. Our program continues tomorrow. Facebook classes will be met from 13. Tomorrow after we're starting with corporate finance, since you're writing next week from 13 to 15, then POM. I'll end here unless there are any questions. Thank you so much.